Sammy Wilson.
Deputy Speaker, can I say that, first of all, we all recognise the difficult task that the Chancellor has in this budget, the tightrope he has to walk, go too far one way, and immediately we have our financial credibility affected, interest rates go up, too far the other way, and the ability, as members have suggested, for us to earn our way out of this recession is severely impaired. So, as far as we're concerned, because we don't have any political points to score against a party which is not represented in Northern Ireland, we want to see the Chancellor and the government succeed. However, and I think that it is important to look then at the budget on that basis. Is this a budget which is designed and likely to succeed in achieving the objective that we all want to see us restored back to growth and also to see employment levels go up? There are some things in it to be welcomed, and let me just list the things from a Northern Ireland perspective. First of all, the devolution of air passenger duty, which will be included in the Finance Bill, which will enable the Northern Ireland Executive to set its own rate for long-haul direct flights from Northern Ireland, very essential to our investment strategy and to tourism. That's to be welcomed. The reduction in corporation tax is to be welcomed because it brings us closer, though it still leaves a huge difference between the rate in Northern Ireland and the rate in the Irish Republic, which is our main competitor for foreign direct investment. The changes for the film and the high-end TV tax concessions. Again, an industry which we've been seeking to promote in Northern Ireland, and of course the Game of Thrones is now filmed in Northern Ireland and has been a big revenue earner for Northern Ireland, and something that the Executive has pushed for. And of course Belfast being included in as one of the broadband cities. So there is much to be welcomed in this. However, when I look at it, there are three things which concern me. And the first is this, that there is potential, and I believe that there is potential, for the government to go further in spending money on infrastructure for the whole of the United Kingdom, which could then enhance economic growth and indeed draw down some of those private funds, that £700 billion of cash that companies are currently hoarding, if indeed there was a pump priming by the government. And if the Chancellor believed his own rhetoric, where he talks about the deficit as a percentage of GDP is down, debt as a percentage of GDP is down, the public sector net debt peak is not going to be as high as what it was anticipated, and we're on course for deficit reduction, then of course he must know that his credibility in the money markets is sufficient to at least allow him to go out and invest in projects, not to pay unemployment benefit, but to invest in projects which have a rate of return and which could actually help to promote economic growth. And either he doesn't believe his own rhetoric, or else he is deliberately, because of ideological reasons perhaps, holding back on what I believe could be an important means of investment. The second thing which concerns me with this budget is the choice that has been made. It's been referred to by other members. But I think at a time when we are preaching austerity to people who are bleeding, people who can't pay their heating bills, people who can't pay their rent, people who can't afford in some cases to buy their food, for the government to give a priority of reducing the top rate of tax for the top 2% earners in this country is just bizarre. And I think it shows blatant disregard for the sacrifices we're asking other people to make. And we all know how difficult that is. And if one looks at the way in which that money could have been spent, there's been much argument today about whether or not the rich will pay more. And the one thing we do know is that immediately that reduction, I'll give in a moment or two, that reduction of 5% will release £3,010 million to that top 2% of wage earners. Now, the government is relying on tax exiles flooding the shores of the United Kingdom. and going to the doors of Her Majesty Revenue and Customs and beating the door down, asking could they pay their tax in the United Kingdom now. That's what the government's relying on. Yeah. And you know, the Treasury hide it behind, because it's assumption, the term behavioural assumptions. But we don't know, and indeed, look at the literature. There are a lot of assumptions there that may or may not be realised. It's the same with the money from the stamp duty and the money from the limit on the claims that can be brought back. But the fact of the matter is that money which is being released, and we know is being released, those top earners, could have been used in a better way. For example, it could have been used to release fuel duty. Despite the fact that fuel prices are going up, the government is going to take £800 million more off motorists in the United Kingdom this year. Would that not have been a better use of the money which is going to be come as a result? I'll give way. Yeah. Sorry, I'll give way.
I'm thoroughly enjoying the gentleman's speech, and so I wouldn't want to interrupt it for a second. But can I just ask, when he talks about what a better way to spend that money would be, what money is he talking about? What we know from the Treasury is that this, our top rate, raised very little incremental cash, and what we know from the Treasury is that reducing it is likely to raise more money from the same people. So how on earth, what money is he talking about?
To the Treasury, the direct impact, the direct static cost is going to be £3,010 million. There's the figure that the Treasury has put out. Now, some of that will be offset by behavioural change, but that's based on assumptions about tax income elasticity and what happens to income. So there is money there, real money, which will go back to people who currently are top-rate taxpayers. My argument is this. If the government was going to release that kind of fund, then was it not far, far better being released to either bring more of the low-income families out of tax, or to release the hard-pressed motorist from the fuel duty which is going to be imposed on them?
The honourable gentleman for giving way. He's making a very compelling case. Is he aware that there are just 4,000 taxpayers in Northern Ireland who earn over £150,000 a year?
There are, and I want to come on to another measure in this which will affect hundreds of thousands of people, but I'll give way to the member from North Belfast first.
I'm very grateful to the honourable gentleman, and the people of Northern Ireland are grateful to him for the work he does as Finance Minister in Northern Ireland and moving the economy forward there. But would he agree that in terms of fuel duty, people are terribly disappointed up and down the country today that there is no additional measures in here which will reduce the amount of fuel duty and VAT on petrol and diesel, which is the highest in Northern Ireland in the entire European Union?
Well, the continuation of the measures which the government has in the budget already will be to take another £800 million out of motorists' pockets over the next year. The last point that I want to come to and to touch on is the regional pay issue. And some people may regard this as special pleading for Northern Ireland. But could I remind members in this House that members who represent constituencies outside London and the south east of England will be impacted by this. All of the rest of the United Kingdom will be impacted by this particular measure. And the idea that wages should be frozen for people in the public sector because there's a difference between, or currently, and this is an important point, currently a difference between the private sector and the public sector wages, and somehow or other by freezing the public sector wages, we are then going to stimulate the private sector. Now, where the economics of that comes in, I don't quite understand. Because, of course, freezing wages in the public sector, and especially once you go outside the south east of England, given the prominence of the public sector, not just in Northern Ireland but elsewhere, that's a deflationary impact. And the very areas of the United Kingdom which currently are falling behind, even with the very slow rate of economic growth for the country as a whole, are the parts which are going to be most punished. This is one of the most divisive measures that I have ever heard. And it doesn't even address a problem, because there is no evidence. We've got 3 million people unemployed. We're not recruiting in the public sector. So how on earth are wages which are higher in the public sector going to stop private sector employers being able to find workers? It doesn't work. And the impact of this measure, I believe, will be very, very detrimental, and I hope it's something that we will have an opportunity to come back to and look at in much more detail in this House, because I believe that it is one of the most pernicious measures which has been floated in this particular budget. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I believe that there are things which the government could have done and has not done. I believe that there's an unfairness in this budget, not just an unfairness between different income groups, but between different regions of the United Kingdom. And for a government, and I'm a Unionist, I believe in the value of the Union. I believe that it is important that, as being part of the Union, and that we bear the burden when there's a problem. And it's one of the reasons, and the member for North Belfast mentioned, that despite the unpopularity which it has probably led to in Northern Ireland, I have made the case that if there's an economic crisis facing the United Kingdom, we cannot ask to be exempt from the burden to be borne. But it makes it far, far more difficult to go out to public sector workers and say your wages are going to be frozen. It makes it far difficult to say to the ordinary citizen, tighten your belt. It makes it more difficult to say to people who live in Northern Ireland that, look, you've got to go through these hard times, when at the same time you've got a government that says one group of people tighten your belt, and by the way, for those who can most afford it, we're asking you to loosen your belt, and we'll fill your pockets. And that's exactly where the unfairness in this budget lies. And for that reason, whilst I want to see the government succeeding, I believe that it hasn't taken the opportunity to inject money into the economy. If it's got credibility, then use that credibility in the finance markets and borrow to invest in infrastructure rather than paying people to sit at work on the dole. If it wants to be people to face up to the hard economic facts, then do it fairly and not on an unjust and an uneven way. And if it wants to be the government for the United Kingdom, then let's make sure that some parts of the United Kingdom are not asked to bear a bigger burden than others.